This is the screen that you should have after you finish the last tutorial. So let's review. The first thing that we did was we calculated a slope function. So here's my slope function up here, and what that is calculating is the variable cost per unit of overhead. Next, we calculated an intercept function, and that gave us our fixed overhead cost. Then we calculated an R-squared statistic. Now let's explore that for a minute. An R-squared statistic ranges from 0 to 1. And you see this one at 0.939284 lies closer to the 1 end of the continuum. Look at the way that these data points are scattered around this line. They're very close to the line. If this R-squared statistic were 1, every one of those data points would lie exactly on that line. That's perfect correlation. If the R-squared statistic were 0, it would look like somebody had shot a shotgun at this chart, and the data points would be all over the place. This is pretty nice data. You don't see data like this in the real world. In business, we're doing pretty well to have R-squareds of 0.35. So you could see where the data would be much more dispersed around the line in that situation. That would be a little bit more realistic. So the next thing that we did was we created a chart, and if you followed all the steps tutorial, you wound up with a chart that looked like this, and we got this nice little formula. This is a cost formula. So what this is saying is Y, that's our total cost for overhead, is equal to 3.94 approximately, I'm rounding, times X, which is the units. We could plug any level of units in there within our relevant range, plus $7,114 in fixed costs. That will give us an estimate for our total overhead costs. So that's a nice thing to have. So the last thing that we did was we copied the values we'd calculated over here. We just referenced those cells and filled in our question marks for the variable portion of our overhead and the fixed portion of our overhead. Now, I did note that our sum columns updated themselves. So we've got total variable cost of $17.96, and our total fixed costs are $23,614. Now I chose a sales price of $22. Notice that's a hard number, and you can change that, okay, because we're going to go on and do some other things with this and reference that, but I chose that. Now what I didn't get to last time was contribution margin. We've got a contribution margin of $4.04. Now the way that's calculated, let's look up here. There's the formula, B10 minus B8. So all I did was I took the $22 sales price per unit and I subtracted the variable cost per unit of $17.96. So that's how I came up with the $4.04. Now the 6,500 units, I should say, are in projected February 2013 sales. That is also a hard number, and I can change that. Okay, that's just part of my input sheet. And we'll do something later in the week with this target profit amount of 35,000. And again, that's a hard number, and I'll show you how you can change that, and it'll affect what we do later in the week. Let's move on to creating a projection. Now we're introducing a new format of income statement here. And notice I've got the usual suspects in terms of sales and operating income. However, everything in between, I've changed the way that I'm categorizing my cost. So what you guys are used to seeing is sales minus cost of goods sold equals gross margin minus operating expenses equals operating income. That's a very simple absorption-based income statement, and that's what we've been working with. This is a contribution format income statement, and we categorize our cost as either variable or fixed. So that's why we went through all of this regression stuff. We need a way to separate the variable and the fixed portion of our mixed cost so we can get them in the right area on this income statement. So notice we did that with overhead. And notice up here I have a variable overhead cost, and down here I've got the fixed portion of overhead. Okay, so that's why we were doing that regression. We also had another mixed cost, which I just gave you the numbers for. So you'll see that we're going to plug in the variable portion of distribution up here in our variable category, and then we'll plug in the fixed portion of distribution down here in our fixed category. And notice we had one purely fixed cost, administration. If you go back to the input sheet, you'll see that administration was purely fixed, and it doesn't appear up here in the variable category. It only appears down in the fixed category. So that's where we're going as far as our new format of income statement. And once we build this thing, we'll be able to do some pretty interesting analysis, which we'll cover next. Now we're going to do a projection, and I'm going to put the projected sales in units on this new tab. You'll notice I've got a new tab here for projection. And I'm going to go in and grab that 6,500 off my input sheet. So I did equals and I went in and got that. All right, now let's start filling in our income statement. Sales is a function. So I'm going to go grab my 6,500 units, equals, go get that. And then I'm going to multiply that by my sales per unit, which I have in my input page. Remember that $22? There it is. Hit enter, and I've got $143,000 in sales at 6,500 units. Let's grab direct materials. So again, I'm going to use that 6,500. So I'll hit equals, grab the 6,500, and I'm going to multiply that by my direct labor per unit cost. See that $8.80 up there? $8.80. Grab that, hit enter. There it is. Same program with direct labor. Equals, I'll go grab that 6,500, go to my input page, and grab the direct labor amount and hit enter, and that does the multiplication for me. So let's do overhead. Grab that 6,500, go to my input page. There's that 394 that we calculated for overhead. Hit enter. Oh, there's distribution. Okay. Okay, so let's total these up. We've got total variable costs for these 4 variable inputs. So I'll just go in and grab my auto sum and total up that column. And there's total variable cost, 116,726. So let's calculate contribution margin. I'll take my sales minus total variable cost, and that gives me 26,274. Now, that is the big numbers. We saw the little numbers over on the input sheet, and we got that $4.04 per unit. Let's grab fixed costs now. So I'll grab the fixed portion of my overhead off the input sheet. That's that amount we calculated with the intercept function. There it is. Distribution, go grab the same thing. 50, oops, jumping ahead. Okay, so sum up my total fixed cost, and I've got 23,614. All right, so calculating operating income or income before tax, I'm going to take my contribution margin and subtract total fixed cost, and I've got $2,660. Notice these numbers are all at the 6,500 unit level, okay? And the only thing that changed because of flexing with that 6,500 were my variable costs. Notice my fixed costs aren't going to change if I change the projected sales in units. So let's try changing our projected sales in units and see what happens. Okay, so I'm at 6,500. Let's see what happens if I double that to 13,000. Okay, so I hit enter, go back to my projection. Look what happened to my variable overhead numbers. Remember I told you that the relationship, one of our definitions of variable cost was a proportionate relationship between total cost and the activity on the x-axis, which is units in this case. So I've doubled unit on the x-axis, and look what happened to all my numbers up in variable cost. They all doubled. Now, if I would have cut the 6,500 in half and put that in there, I would have seen all of my variable costs cut in half as well. So this exemplifies that definition of variable cost. Now, notice the fixed cost area, nothing has changed. And that's part of the definition as well. Fixed costs are fixed as long as we stay in that relevant range of activity. Okay, so hopefully this is starting to sink in as far as cost behavior goes. Now, what you guys want to do is build the spreadsheet as we have in this tutorial, and you've got the check figures for it. So once you have this thing working, go to your input sheet and change the numbers into the numbers from Project C. And you should have a correct income statement and your new input sheet. And on the input sheet, the graphs will update and your slope functions, intercept functions, and R squared will also update. So that's what I want you to hand in on Monday. Give me a printout of your new projection income statement with the project data, as well as your input sheet with the graph printed out with your Project C data. See you on Monday.